The Eltari Dominion didn't invade Earth outright. That wasn't their style. They preferred integration through inevitability, biopolitical mandates, economic pressure, controlled diplomacy, followed by the slow dissolve of sovereignty under the weight of bureaucracy. It worked on 97 planets across 100 systems. Earth was meant to be the 98th, but something in the human response didn't align. During the series accords, when the Dominion's representatives proposed their standard biosovereignty clause, replacing Earth's genetic governance laws with Dominion-compatible biological controls, the answer wasn't a rejection. It was laughter, not from diplomats, from the technical advisors, from Earth's own delegation support staff. They laughed in the middle of a formal assembly, not out of disrespect, but disbelief that the Eltari thought they could rewrite human biology through a form. The meeting dissolved. A month later, Earth's orbital research platforms suffered synchronized system failures. Power relays fried, data cores ruptured, 6 personnel were lost on Station Athena. 3 months after that, satellite audits revealed previously unlogged microdebris, fragments made of Dominion alloy. It wasn't a mystery, it was a warning. The United Terran Council didn't issue a formal response. There was no condemnation, no retaliation. Instead, they activated a protocol buried in a sub-level of the Earth Defense Archive, Directive Halcyon. Unlike past military initiatives, Halcyon wasn't about building fleets or calling for allies. It was about folding Earth inward, making its core untraceable. Climate reform programs were fast-tracked, with massive funding pushed into orbital cleanup, atmosphere stabilization, and ocean reclamation. Global energy grids underwent civilian optimization, with new fusion arrays introduced under the guise of sustainable transition. The public saw a renaissance. The Dominion saw a distracted, collapsing species burning its money on beautification. That was the mask. Beneath it, every energy breakthrough, every orbital shift, every logistics reroute served one purpose: concealed rearmament. Earth's shipyards didn't grow, they vanished. Under Lake Vostok, beneath 4 kilometers of ice and thermal interference, entire vessel lines were constructed inside caverns carved by geothermal drills. Ships were built in the dark, launched into the dark, and never tagged under Terran IDs. Not one appeared on any registry. Not one bore a flag. Industrial redirection followed. Sectors were reshaped through economic pressure, small businesses absorbed into green future initiatives, transport companies rerouted through decoy contracts, all tied together by anonymous shell corporations with directives written in obscure legal dialects. Cargo manifests included machinery that didn't exist. Export taxes applied to shipments never loaded. The Dominion, watching from orbital relays and proxy traders, logged Earth's activity as chaotic, inefficient, weak. That misread wasn't accidental, it was engineered. Earth had learned from the Accord failures. The Dominion didn't fear strength, they expected it. What they ignored was misdirection. While the Dominion catalogued every new satellite and budgetary resolution, Earth seeded its true weapons in shadows. The first sleeper drones launched during what was reported as a deep space atmospheric survey. They looked like environmental probes, carbon sensors, radiation collectors, magnetospheric monitors. That was their shield. In reality, each carried a gravitic mesh segment, programmed to unspool over the course of several months and anchor itself to dead comets or forgotten mining structures. Hundreds drifted quietly beyond the Kuiper belt, forming an invisible web of interferes, vents and trap-laced distortion fields. The Eltari had no reason to investigate. Probes were routine. Earth, after all, had always been obsessed with tracking its own climate decline. Let them watch the ice melt while sleeper coils tightened. Back on Earth, a silent war of nomenclature took place. Military-grade AI cores were relabeled as orbital weather models. Subsurface radar mapping became tectonic stabilization research. Personnel weren't trained in defense, they were volunteer survey analysts. Scientists who had once operated interstellar navigation systems now worked in nondescript government offices under programs that didn't advertise their existence. Even the satellites were renamed. Pathfinder arrays became the Eden Network, their weaponization hidden behind soft branding and PR campaigns about universal connectedness. It wasn't deception in the traditional sense, it was architectural misdirection. Every truth was buried beneath 5 layers of perfectly plausible, fully documented lies. Lake Vostok became the heart of the operation. The Dominion's monitoring systems picked up geothermal fluctuations but attributed them to Earth's clumsy industrial experiments. After all, the planet had only recently resolved its last climate crisis. No one thought to trace the patterns to see how the heat pulses corresponded with launch trajectories. The ships didn't ignite engines on the surface. They exited laterally through polar canyons coated in thermal dampening shrouds, riding magnetically boosted rail ejectors that left no trace above ice level. Once airborne, they disappeared into pre-plotted gravitational shadows cast by Jupiter's moons, slipping into the dark under cover of routine celestial movement. Not one Dominion observer marked their passage. They called Earth dormant, broken, a world too obsessed with itself to evolve, and as their recon fleet logged only sporadic broadcasts and decayed, signal strength from Terran channels, their scouts concluded Earth had begun to collapse internally. Bureaucracy, political entropy, economic infighting, all classic pre-assimilation indicators. The Dominion expected to walk in with translators and contracts within the decade, maybe sooner. They didn't see the web. They didn't see the silence for what it was, not absence, not withdrawal, it was preparation. The last shot of this chapter belongs to a lone Eltari scout drone drifting above the southern pole, watching seismic activity near Vostok's rim. The report it sends back notes heat distortion, minor tectonic shifts, and anomalous magnetospheric readings, likely atmospheric turbulence. It flags nothing, tags nothing, logs the data under routine glacial variance, and moves on. It never sees what's beneath the ice. It never knows what's coming. The Dominion recon fleet drifted past the Kuiper Belt with the lazy confidence of a species that had done this 1,000 times before. 10 vessels formed a forward array, each bristling with sensor suites tuned to deep-range thermals, gravimetric anomalies, and electromagnetic emissions. It was a procedural patrol, no weapons armed, no shields raised. To the Eltari, Earth was still a regional oddity, unpredictable in temperament, but insignificant in reach. The Dominion's internal doctrine classified Sol as low noise, low threat, a backwater system on the cusp of compliance. This incursion wasn't invasion, it was documentation, a sweep to verify that Earth remained stagnant, isolated, and unarmed. The command ship, Velox 3, cruised without escort protocol, trailing resource extractors and automated telemetry drones. The crew on board monitored data feeds with detached interest, noting minor gravitic pulses and rising subaural static in the Neptune sector. There was no urgency. Nothing ever happened near Neptune. But something did happen. Earth had been waiting for it. From Neptune's shadow line, where solar interference masked passive drift signatures, 34 ships came to life. Project Aegir had no launch ceremony, no activation alert. Its vessels didn't ignite drives. They simply moved, detaching from the cold void like ink spreading underwater. These were not standard warships. Built under ice, tested in silence, they lacked the usual energy profiles Dominion scanners were calibrated to detect. Their hulls refracted long-range pings into ghost signals. Their movement systems were magnetic and vector-balanced. No ion trails, no thermal bloom. They weren't cloaked. They were invisible by design. They didn't jam. They didn't need to. By the time Dominion sensors pinged them, they had already fired. The first torpedo struck the aft stabilizers of the Velox 3, a compression round designed not to explode, but to rupture. The rear third of the ship crumpled inward like a paper cylinder under pressure, collapsing into a meter-wide knot of fused metal and bone. No alarms sounded. The impact didn't register until it was too late. In sequence, 9 more compression torpedoes hit their marks, 1 per vessel, timed to impact at 6-second intervals. These weren't warheads, they were erasers. Entire ships folded into themselves before bridge crews could stand. No lights, no screams, just brief flickers of mass compression followed by silence. 6 minutes after Aegir's activation, the entire Dominion fleet was gone. High above Neptune's orbit, a small probe, the only Dominion unit not targeted, fled into open transmission range, broadcasting fragments of the carnage. The message was corrupted, distorted by the same quantum interference fields Earth had planted months earlier. Still, enough remained for Dominion Command to know something had gone wrong. The response was immediate. Deep inside the Dominion's Beta Helion command lattice, Admiral Varnax received the fragmented alert and, without waiting for clarification, triggered Protocol 0x9. It was a text bow. OK maneuver, regroup all available forward units at a designated fallback coordinate. It had worked during the Sevron collapse, the Erix fragmentation, even during the failed Threnix mutiny. But Varnax didn't know that Earth had been studying Dominion doctrine with obsessive precision for the last 2 years. Protocol 0x9's coordinates weren't random, they were historical, a fixed point used for fallback calculations across multiple campaigns. Earth had predicted that the moment pressure was applied, the Dominion would seek their own safety. And they knew exactly where that safety point would be. 9 months prior, during what appeared to be a long-range asteroid mining survey, Earth had seeded the coordinates with distortion mines. Gravitational anomalies strung across an empty field, tied together with quantum-threaded filaments anchored into free-drifting ice masses. Nothing about the space looked unusual, no energy signatures, no structural markers. But under stress, under the thrust of military-scale engines, the distortion field activated. 2 Dominion carriers arrived first. They dropped out of warp, initiated full burn toward regroup pattern, and instantly triggered the lattice. From a distance, the effect appeared almost peaceful, a ripple across space, a slight shimmer. Then the ships folded, not like origami, but like ruptured muscle. Their midsections stretched, compressed, then split down vectors that didn't align with physical laws. One carrier spun apart in 3 directions at once before vanishing in a silent flare. The other burst open like a seed pod, its interior flung across 20 kilometers in frozen arcs. 6,000 crew members ceased to exist in less than 10 seconds. No Dominion vessel in proximity knew what happened. They hadn't been attacked. No weapons were detected. To their systems, the environment itself had malfunctioned. Emergency alerts screamed across the fleet, but none provided clarity. Autopilot nav systems began glitching. Backup AI units flagged the area as structurally unstable and rerouted vessels, only to find similar anomalies scattered across fallback corridors. For the first time in decades, a Dominion fleet didn't know whether to advance, retreat, or hold. Varnax, watching from his command station, received feed after feed of corrupted telemetry, gibberish data, and burst signal fragments of screams, ship schematics, and flickers of hull distortion. His analysts argued, was this sabotage? Natural anomaly? Experimental weapon? No one could answer, and still, Earth said nothing. They didn't transmit demands, didn't release footage, didn't claim responsibility. Dominion War Councils scrambled to find pattern, motive, intention. But there was none, only consequence, only silence. At Dominion Central Relay, a low-level comms officer studied a replay feed from the Velox 3. For a split second before the signal died, a blurred visual appeared, a ripple, a flicker, a movement in the dark. The officer enhanced it once, twice. A shape emerged, sleek, curved, cold, not Dominion, not known. He tagged the feed for review. But the data corrupted before upload. The screen went black. He stared at it for a long time, and then he pressed delete. The Eltari Dominion did not retreat. They retaliated. The loss of 10 recon ships and the silent collapse of 2 carriers ignited a protocol older than the current ruling line. From Beta Helion, the Dominion's second-largest military anchor, 86 warships surged into motion, launched in a hyperwave column designed to punch straight through Sol's orbital fringe. There were no diplomats in this fleet, no envoys, no observers. These ships carried orbital cleansers, ground sterilizers, and fleet-based AI designed to suppress planetary resistance within hours. They did not come to speak. They came to remind the Gala, Swai, of consequence. Earth didn't blink. There was no global announcement, No mass deployment, no kinetic counterstrike. Instead, at a precise hour synchronized to the fleet's trajectory estimates, Earth initiated Condition Black. Across the planet, all civilian authority transferred instantly to autonomous command systems embedded within critical infrastructure. Power grids rerouted through military cores. Transit systems halted. Communications went silent. Emergency signals were blocked. Above and below ground, thousands of sleeper nodes activated, not with weapons, but with control. Subsurface vaults beneath the Pacific and Arctic shelves opened, releasing command-grade AIs that hadn't spoken in over a decade. In the deepest trenches, sealed cryo-vaults spun up. Personnel listed as lost or transferred reawakened in darkened chambers, their bodies frozen in stasis, minds still trained for war. They didn't ask questions. Their orders were already encoded in their neural links. The Dominion fleet entered Sol space expecting resistance formations. They expected to detect mobilization, shield matrices, defense grids, maybe orbital missile nests. What they found was quiet. No comm traffic, no targeting data. Earth, as far as their scanners could tell, was dormant. At first, Dominion Command believed Earth had withdrawn to bunkers. Then something stranger happened. As the fleet moved closer to Mars orbit, their internal comm relays began misfiring. Ship-to-ship synchronization lagged. Positional data fluctuated. Orders sent from forward command arrived garbled or out of sequence. An entire squadron of mid-range cruisers received a maneuver vector that curved them into the gravitational pull of a defense asteroid they'd mapped a week prior. Except the asteroid wasn't there anymore. Two cruisers collided while trying to avoid a sensor ghost. One ejected its crew into hard vacuum. The cause? A targeting ping that wasn't Dominion in origin. Earth had spent 2 years decoding the Dominion's own command net structure, timing intervals, signal encryption curves, and AI behavior profiles. It wasn't enough to jam. Jamming could be detected. Earth infiltrated the signal itself. Using deep space relay drones that had drifted for months along passive orbits, Earth seeded mimicked pings into the Dominion's communication layers, creating false priority tags, phantom unit IDs, and corrupted IFF, identify friend or foe pulses. Dominion ships began reporting human vessels that didn't exist. Flashes of shapes along Saturn's rings, energy blooms near Ceres, drive signatures in the upper magnetosphere. Squadrons adjusted course to engage targets that weren't real. In one sector, 3 cruisers initiated a full barrage on what they believed was a Terran railgun platform near Ganymede. They fired thousands of high-yield plasma bursts into empty space. The echoes blinded their own rear sensors for minutes. When the feed finally cleared, half their formation was missing. The ships weren't destroyed. They'd veered off course, chasing ghosts Earth had programmed into their battle net. Fleet commanders on board the Vornith Rex, the Dominion's lead battlecruiser, argued over whether the anomalies were signs of advanced cloaking or systemic sabotage. But by then, doubt had already crept in. An entire squad of long-range scouts returned early, reporting navigational systems that refused to sync with galactic markers. Their orientation grid, reliant on Dominion star catalogs, began showing Earth in the wrong location. The planet was drifting, or the maps were false, or they weren't seeing Earth at all. Inside command centers, AI assistants began issuing alerts that contradicted sensor feeds. Some claimed enemy vessels were within 10,000 kilometers. Others reported no threat. Officers tried to resynchronize inputs manually to find command override locks appearing out of nowhere. One captain ordered a full diagnostic and watched her interface dissolve into static before rebooting with 3 different Dominion languages simultaneously. By the time she re-established control, half her weapon systems were locked by an authorization key that didn't exist in Dominion protocol. Earth's ships remained invisible. They didn't decloak. They didn't fire. They guided. Every flicker of chaos, every misfire, every false engagement was orchestrated with surgical timing. From deep within Sol's shadowed sectors, Human Command AI tracked Dominion fleet movement in real time, bending the Dominion's own data into weapons. It wasn't electronic warfare, it was cognitive deconstruction. Earth wasn't fighting the fleet, it was unbinding it. Inside one Dominion corvette, A weapons officer sat frozen at his console. The interface reported an incoming enemy, closing at 0.04 light seconds. No visual, no mass signature. But the system screamed for target lock. He turned to the captain, mouth half open, but the captain was staring at his own screen, one that displayed a different threat. Behind them, an AI voice whispered, "Incoming." A full 5 minutes passed. Nothing came. The enemy never existed. Across the fleet, Dominion captains began doubting not just their systems, but themselves. Were they under attack, or were they hallucinating? Could the human presence even be confirmed, or was Earth simply gone, leaving behind a battlefield that felt like war, moved like war, but killed through confusion? Some ordered system shutdowns, desperate to isolate corrupted nodes. Others fired blindly at sensor pings. One vessel opened a broad-spectrum transmission, demanding Earth reveal itself. There was no reply, but somewhere, unseen, unregistered, Earth ships listened and smiled. The Dominion believed that brute scale could overwrite uncertainty. They sent Xantraxis, the largest siege cruiser in the Helion-class series, into Sol's inner orbit with one directive: orbital sterilization. It didn't matter if Earth's fleet remained hidden or if their transmissions were absent. The Dominion's calculus was simple: erase what you cannot predict. From behind the curve of Jupiter's shadow, the Xantraxis deployed its tri-core AI relay and began calculating a system-wide ignition sweep, a full beam array sweep of Earth's near-orbital infrastructure. Precision wasn't required. The Dominion intended to incinerate every potential launch platform, relay array, and atmospheric tether within a 1,000-kilometer shell. No demands, no declaration, just ash. What the Dominion didn't know was that the beam's activation frequency was the final trigger Earth had been waiting for. Captain Idran Falk stood at the forward interface aboard Hammerfall, a vessel that had no official designation, no registry, and no national signature. It didn't need one. Built in a subglacial void, tested under atmospheric silence, Hammerfall had never docked at a station. It had never refueled. It operated under a single condition: zero exposure. Idran Falk wasn't a decorated hero or a political tool. He was a legacy officer of the Cold Node Initiative, a human era that trained commanders to think in probabilities, not patriotism. And his probability matrix had shown one certainty: the Dominion would send something big. It would come late, and it would aim to clean the board. Hammerfall had been waiting for exactly that moment. Hidden inside the telemetry profile of a small moonlit fragment drifting along Jupiter's arc, Hammerfall moved without wake, without thrust, embedded within the gravitational interference of a rock barely 4 kilometers wide. To external sensors, the moonlet read as inert debris. To Earth's control network, it was a weapon sheath. The moonlet's mass signature had been precisely calibrated. Every 10 seconds, Hammerfall adjusted its position by microbursts of electromass realignment, staying within 0.04% variance of the rock's density pattern. Even Dominion long-range pulse sweeps passed over them like wind over a mirror. The ship had been there for weeks, patient, cold, tracking the Xantraxis through its own shadow. The Singularity mine was already armed before the Xantraxis arrived. Installing it wasn't simple. The mine, a gravitic destabilizer no larger than a missile tube, had to be slotted into a precise arc along the moonlet's outer spin. Stabilization required 3 synced pulses from Hammerfall's core processor, all while remaining inside the passive EM drift window. One wrong move, one mistimed correction, and the mine would either detonate too early or fail to trigger. The crew, trained in cryochamber simulation drills, executed the arming in 6 minutes 37 seconds. No light, no motion, no sound above a whisper. Then they waited. The Xantraxis aligned for firing, its AI relay core spooling the energy pulse through 3 channel nodes. The harmonic oscillation was unique, deep-range, Tier 9 spectrum, enough to displace magnetosphere layers across a planetary orbit. But Earth had already modeled that frequency. In fact, it had counted on it. The mine's activation trigger was built to resonate at the peak of that exact harmonic wave. When the Xantraxis initiated the final power-up sequence, it created the one signal that Earth had embedded into every failed Deadman circuit, the kill note. What happened next wasn't an explosion, it was a folding. The Xantraxis, 3 kilometers of plated alloy, tremor-jointed armor, and nested subcores, bent inward at the center line. It began slowly, like a ripple in cloth, the hull warping against its own symmetry. Then it collapsed faster. The central ring structure inverted, the portside reactor bulged and vanished, and the ship seemed to disappear into itself, section by section, until only fragments remained. There was no fire, no shockwave, just a quiet implosion as mass unraveled under its own betrayal. A final flicker of silver, then gone. The Dominion fleet watched in silence. No commands followed, no AI relays pinged. The tri-core AI node inside Xantraxis had been the nerve center for half the assault group. With it gone, the rest of the fleet suffered cascading feedback failures. Navigation protocols entered recursive loops. Targeting arrays reset. Command tiers destabilized. Several ships spun in place, waiting for orders that would never arrive. Officers screamed over fractured comms. Engineers tried to re-engage formation logic. The sky didn't answer. Hammerfall remained invisible. It didn't linger. It didn't strike again. Captain Falk gave one signal, and the vessel began extraction, sliding backward through the same gravitational wake it had arrived in. No trace left behind, not even heat. In the darkness, the Dominion ships drifted, leaderless, blind, and surrounded by nothing but their own reflection. Captain Idran Falk didn't speak when the final data packet confirmed the Xantraxis collapse. He didn't need to. The silence on board Hammerfall was habitual by now, a conditioned discipline of the crew that extended beyond stealth into thought, into presence. No celebration, no broadcast, just motion. As the Dominion fleet spiraled into disorder behind them, Hammerfall began the exit protocol coded into its central sequence: clean disengagement, zero imprint, Earth. His victory depended not only on the blow, but the absence that followed it. The gravitic anchors laced through the orbit of Jupiter's shadow were retracted in silent sequence, each node collapsing back into its containment shell, folding into non-reflective casings that auto-shredded after retrieval. Earth's ships, Aegir units, shadow frigates, drone carriers, vanished from their positions one by one, not by flight, but by precision unweaving. The retreat wasn't rushed. It was timed against solar wind patterns, gravitational tides, and the thermal noise bursts from Jupiter's lower magnetosphere. Earth's navigators used those distortions as a curtain, slipping through planetary shadows and ambient radiation belts. In low orbit, scrambler drones detonated fields of quantum static engineered to mimic solar interference, overwriting Dominion passive sensors with noise patterns that matched flare behavior. The withdrawal plan had been embedded in Directive Halcyon from the beginning. Every vessel, once its task was complete, would erase itself. Not just from radar, from memory. No path, no signature, no wake. They left no proof of presence, only after effects. Burn patterns too vague to triangulate, timing anomalies too brief to log. Above Mars orbit, Earth's final relay drone activated its last sequence, a dispersion burst of microparticles laced with signal decay algorithms. The particles clung to Dominion sensor fields, smearing their input across false coordinates, making it appear that entire formations were still active. The deception would last 30 minutes, long enough for every ship to reach deep cryo-silence and begin drift toward dark space fallback corridors. Every trace of their engagement, every burst signal, gravitic bloom, even residual magnetic fields was accounted for, overwritten or masked. By the time Dominion reinforcements arrived from Beta Helion, Sol was a dead system. Their long-range scans found no wreckage, no movement, no electronic emissions. The orbital grid surrounding Earth showed no activity. Ceres was quiet. Mars was silent. Even Jupiter's chaotic belts showed only natural radiation storms. Not a single enemy vessel appeared on record. The AI relays on board the reinforcements flagged the system as cleared, but officers refused to believe it. They scoured relay logs, attempted triangulation, launched probes. Everything returned null. They demanded confirmation of the Xantrax's position. No response. They reviewed backup command routes. Everyone returned a blank checksum. Fractures began to form inside the Dominion fleet. Commanders argued whether an engagement had even occurred. Some claimed it had to have been a simulation gone rogue, an AI failure, a test that spiraled. Others insisted the losses were real but unprovable. There was no formal battle report. No visual records survived. Fleet-wide data appeared corrupted, overwritten with diagnostic logs from systems that didn't match the Xantrax's known architecture. One officer posited the unthinkable, that Earth had not only defeated their vanguard, but erased the war itself. As the reinforcements orbited Jupiter's dark side, staring into the emptiness where their flagship should have been, doubt began to metastasize. And still, no declaration came. No message from Earth, no demands, no surrender. Just the echo of a vanished presence and the stench of disorientation. There were no enemies to fire upon, no territory to reclaim. Earth hadn't taken a planet or station. It had taken something else, something the Dominion had never lost before. Certainty. They no longer knew what the battlefield was, no longer trusted their systems, their maps, their assumptions. Earth had rewritten not just the engagement, but the expectation of what an engagement looked like. Back in the operations center of the Dominion's secondary relay ship, a young officer, barely into his first tour, sat at a control console, scrolling through the system logs. Line after line of null returns, failed handshakes, collapsed ping loops. He cross-checked system time against fleet timestamp caches. They didn't align. The log shifted forward, then backward, as if the entire battle had occurred in a window that shouldn't exist. No footage, no confirmed kills, no debris. The junior officer's fingers hovered over the command line. Then he stopped. Because the screen didn't show absence, it showed nothing. And he didn't know which was worse. In the weeks that followed, the Dominion Senate convened behind sealed atmospheric vaults deep within the Eltari capital moon. There was no broadcast of proceedings, no external mention of what had happened in Sol. The incident was coded Directive Black Sun, a term reserved for anomalies that could not be explained, only quarantined. Officially, Earth remained uncontacted, unacknowledged. But inside the highest echelon of Dominion War Command, a different conversation unfolded. Not about retaliation, not about war, about containment, of panic, of truth, of the idea that something so foundationally unpredictable had entered their calculus. For the first time in Dominion history, war colleges issued a new classification, Tier Null Threat, an origin system with unknown technological escalation, no observable military doctrine, and no established pattern of deterrence behavior. The designation included only one name, Sol. The ripple effect struck faster than the Dominion could suppress. Subject worlds, once proud to wear the banner of Eltari protection, began requesting embassy evaluations, not publicly, not on record, but the messages arrived all the same. Unti, raceable relays, disconnected diplomatic signals, questions whispered in formal corridors. Was Earth acting alone? Was this a human-only initiative, or had they been aided? Worse, were there other halcyon projects in progress across the galaxy? No one could answer, because Earth said nothing. They made no announcement, no threat, no demonstration. The silence they left behind did not fade. It amplified, into rumor, into revision. Internal Dominion networks reported unusual fractures in secondary systems. One governor suspended trade routes, citing restructural concerns. Another planetary bloc initiated total communication blackout, claiming data corruption traced to Earth-aligned subnets. Several lower-tier systems initiated full protocol audits of Dominion AI integration, suspecting embedded code anomalies. None were proven, but none were dismissed either, because the idea had already taken root. If Earth could erase a battle, could they rewrite systems, minds, entire political sequences? At the Dominion's Strategic Oversight Command, generals and systems engineers held weekly simulations, running every permutation they could construct around the Sol incident. Each time they attempted to reconstruct the sequence, the models failed. Not because the data was missing, though it was, but because the assumptions no longer held. One team theorized the engagement never occurred, that the entire sequence was a layered deception. Another argued that Xantraxis had been remotely compromised from within, implausible but not impossible. A third proposed the most disquieting theory of all, that Earth had evolved past warfare as the Dominion understood it, and what they'd witnessed was not a new weapon, but a new form of combat logic, one that defied escalation, one that simply unmade escalation itself. Still, Earth remained silent. The Terran networks never reactivated, no diplomats arrived, no demands were made, trade remained closed. The system sat dark, its border beacon ONS inactive, its planetary broadcasts absent. Yet Dominion listening posts still recorded signal anomalies around Sol's outer edge, patterns that resembled transit, but never confirmed. Commanders began assigning ships to new patrol routes, none near Earth. Fleet cadets were issued revised curriculum at officer academies. A new doctrine addendum was quietly added to operational handbooks, printed, bound, not digital. It read, "Do not engage Sol without Senate override. Do not pursue signal anomalies. Do not assume Earth will negotiate. If contact occurs, disengage immediately and report nothing." No one argued. Years later, in a classified doctrine update distributed to Dominion High Command archives, one entry remained permanently sealed, its heading, "Sol Engagement Parameters Redacted." The page was blank, not for security, but because no one dared write it. And that was the point. Earth had not fought for territory. They had not conquered planets. They had not installed banners or burned capitals. They had done something worse. They left the galaxy wondering what had already been rewritten. And fear? Did Earth win? Or did they rewrite what winning even means? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Was this tactical genius or something more terrifying? And if you want more HFY stories where humanity doesn't just survive, but changes the rules of the galaxy, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss what comes next.